Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello, I'm Rory, and with me always is Ken. How are you, Ken?
Exceptionally well, Rory. Excited that it's another episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Today is episode 124. We're really clicking over those miles, podcast miles, Rory, and a episode packed with information that is going to be of benefit to you, whether you are a practicing practitioner of counselling or a student of counselling. We're starting off actually speaking about a student's journey, and then we have check-in with CPCAB, where Rory actually had a real in-depth chat with Ray Funderpool, and he spoke about assessment tools. You really don't want to miss this. What's happening with assessment tools, and this is the latest, greatest. This is what's happening right now. And we're going to be ending episode 124 today by speaking about psychoeducation. If you are in practice, if you are in placement, you cannot get by without understanding what psychoeducation is and how you can be bringing that into your practice. So let's kick off, and we're going to be talking about a student's journey, Rory. And I wonder, what's the best way that you can think of to speak about a student journey?
Well, I think the best way to speak about a student journey may be to ask a student, Ken. You see what I did there?
Oh, I like that. I like that. Yeah, we got a bit of a surprise here. We have got a real live, Rory, look what I'm doing here, a real live captive student. We've got a guest on our podcast today. It is Julie Naylor. And Julie, just kind of, before we even introduce yourself, can you just tell us what happened last week? What came through your door?
Hello, everyone. Well, last week, what came through my door was my qualification.
So you are now a qualified counsellor.
Unbelievably so. Yes, I am.
Oh, that
Still
is
feels
awesome.
Strange to say that, Ken.
Well, that is awesome. So kind of just so that everyone knows who you are, can you kind of just fill in a little bit of background, tell us who you are, what you've been studying, kind of what levels you've been studying and what your modality is?
Yeah, of course. So I started right at the beginning 4 years ago and went through the diploma route. So I started on the level 2 diploma, followed by level 3, level 4 in person-centered counselling.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. And I think what you mean is you did the introduction, maybe the 10-week course, then you did the certificate, then you did the diploma.
That's right, Rory. Yeah, I did start with the introduction, just the 10 week at first, and then followed on with that. Well,
first of all, congratulations, Julie, on qualifying. What would you think? If you're thinking about your journey, and it is a journey, 4 years, it's a fair part of someone's life. What do you think the biggest obstacle was in the way, or any obstacles that you can think of as you went through that journey?
If I'm being completely honest, when you ask me that question, there's so many that I could be here for ages. But I think I can narrow it down, really. I think the biggest obstacle on a personal level in terms of feelings and emotions was that very thing, the kind of personal journey that you go on, and that I definitely went on when I went through the different levels. In terms of some of the things I found to be quite confronting, you're really looking at yourself when you're doing a counselling course. And even though I'd heard that before I started, only when I was really experiencing it did I realise the fullness of that, if that makes sense. So an obstacle was kind of how much I had to work on myself and how much I didn't realise that was something that would be so involved. And then the second obstacle I found was, without a shadow of a doubt, the assignments.
Now, where have we heard that before, Rory? Julie, we hear about assignments and the kind of the barriers and how that can bring up resistance for people all the time. We hear that in the Facebook group, and of course you're in our Facebook group, aren't you, Julie? And you are known as Julie Wooly Woo in our Facebook group. That's the name that we're going to see you at. And if you're listening to this and you're not a member of the Counselling Tutor Facebook group, get yourself in there. It is just a supportive community of counsellors, of students of counselling, all on this journey, just like yourself, Julie, kind of sharing what the journey's about, sharing wins, sharing challenges, helping one another out. If you've got an assignment and you're struggling with a question, asking in the group, and you're going to get other people chiming in and giving you some ideas on that. And to find our group, you just go to Facebook and you type in the words Counselling Tutor. We're that one at the top. We're the largest group in the world for counsellors, psychotherapists and students. Knock on our door. Our moderators will let you in. Did you get anything yourself, Julie, from the group?
Oh, Ken, honestly, I cannot stress enough how much that group helped me on so many levels. I think for anybody doing a counselling course, and certainly when I was, it can be quite an isolating thing, I found, because your family, although I'm lucky I have a really supportive family, they're not going through that. They're not doing that training. They're not doing that personal development and that self-work and learning how to work with others. And the Counselling Tutor Facebook group was literally a feeling of, oh, look, there's hundreds of other people who are understanding me here and who are feeling these things. And certainly for me, definitely in the earlier days, when I'd kind of tentatively put something out there like, hi guys, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, there'd be instantly comments underneath it going, me too. And it really helped me. It helped me feel like, oh, I'm not on my own with this, which is always a nice feeling, I find.
A shared journey, isn't it, Rory?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And your story is echoed by lots of other people who say the same thing, that it's a unique experience. Even if you have a supportive family, which you've said you do, Julie, they're not going through it. Other people are. So I wonder, was there any other help that you managed to get from, maybe social media or online resources that kind of supplemented your study?
Well, I definitely used the Counselling Tutor website. I started off, and I just found this to be so useful. I started off, I like many people, I have a family of small children, and it's really quite difficult to manage your time around that. So what I used to do, and this is how I started, and if I'm honest, Rory, I still do, I play the podcasts in my car. So whenever I was on my own, without children around me or anybody else, I would use the podcasts and listen to the podcast. And I still do at the gym now. When I go to the gym, I think, I'll just have a listen to this one again and refresh my memory. So I definitely loved the podcasts because they're just so useful.
Well, this is episode 124 episodes, all packed with theory, with skills, with practice, with the journey of studying to be a counsellor, a psychotherapist. But I want to see the smile on your face, Julie, when you're in the gym next, listening to the podcast and hearing yourself talking about listening to the podcast.
That will be, Ken, I don't even know that I will. It's when you hear the sound of your own voice on recordings in my counselling course, I thought, please don't tell me that I really sound like that. It's awful.
Yeah, there's some science behind that, isn't there, Rory? I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's science that kind of when we hear ourselves speak, we listen through our bone structure, because as we're speaking, our sound is resonating internally. But when we hear it back, we're not hearing that internal resonance. So to ourselves, we sound totally foreign and very strange indeed.
We do. Apparently I have a northern accent when I speak. I can't believe that. It's not true, is it?
Yeah, you think you're dead posh, don't you, Rory, when you speak?
I think I've got a BBC accent. And someone told me a long time ago, if you put a book in front of each ear, you actually get what when you speak. You sound like you actually sound when you recorded. So there'll be people walking around putting books in front
I
of them.
can just see it now, doing simulated skills sessions with a book on each ear, so you can hear it as the client hears it. This is so important. Julie, as you were kind of speaking about those obstacles, you mentioned assignments. Now, before we touch on assignments, which is kind of that sticky topic, it's been a long journey. Is it? Did you mention it's been 4 years when you from start to study to receiving that certification or that letter through the door that says you are now a qualified practitioner? And I guess if we go back to those early days, what was it that kind of tempted you in? What brought you in to wanting to be a counsellor, to wanting to be there for other people?
Yeah, that seems like such a long time ago, and it's really not in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, I was just thinking about this actually, Ken, the other day. I always had that desire or that feeling around counselling. I remember leaving college and thinking, I want to do counselling training. And it was my family that kind of put me off. Oh no, you're way too sensitive and emotional for that. You'll be carrying everybody's issues, etc. So it was always kind of there. And I guess when I was teaching, I used to be a teacher in a college. I found that I loved that, but it was kind of a much more natural thing for me, the pastoral side of things, the kind of checking in on students who had issues that were external to their academic learning. And it just really became very clear to me how much people carry all of the time and how that can really block and get in the way of them actually doing what they're more than capable of doing in their lives. And so after I had my children, I kind of thought, now is the time. I want to do this. I really want to support people and help people through their any issues that they might be facing, really.
I know that there are just thousands and thousands of nodding heads as you're saying that, because it is such a commonality, isn't it? That calling to care, wanting to make a difference. And where better to make a difference than being there for a fellow human being, potentially when they're at their lowest of low, and being there and saying, I am here. I will hear you. That is inspirational. That despite the advice and guidance of those closest to you. And of course, and I think that may be a commonality, that people may say, oh, you don't want to be doing that. You take on people's stuff. But I mean, during the counselling training process, and I guess that's why it is, Rory, you can back me up on this. That's why it's 4 years, is we need to develop the skills and we need to develop the personal robustness. I mean, Julie, you started by speaking about your amazing transformation and what that has been personally for you. And that is the training asks of us. To put in boundaries, to work within an ethical framework, to be robust within self.
Yeah, I'll back you up on that, Ken. And it's one of the reasons, of course, that we don't recommend online training, that is face-to-face, being in a classroom, experiencing it. And I think it's really interesting, like as Ken said, like a lot of people who work in maybe a social care setting, they see that they can only do so much for the people they're working with, and some people really need extra help. Seems like it's your experience, Julie, that you wanted to give that extra help, and once you push through the conditions of worth and interjected values, it's not that. There you are, Julie.
Yeah, and I think Ken, what you just said before is really a common feeling. I've heard it a lot in the training, that, and I thought it myself. I remember even saying to Rory, before I'd started, I don't think I can do this because I don't think I'll be able to put these issues down. I'm such an empathic person and I doubt that I'll be able to do it. And Rory said, well, that's what the 4 years of training are for. And it kind of went, oh, okay, so you can help yourself to be able to do that. And it is really interesting that I actually can do that. And I'm even stunned now. I think, wow, yeah, I do that, and I do that quite readily. I'm all right with that.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing, And for those who are wondering, well, how did Julie know Rory? Well, Julie alluded to the fact she was a teacher, and of course, you taught the sociology units and I taught the counselling, and we met because we were in the same office.
Yeah.
And we had lots of wonderful conversations about the world of counselling and psychotherapy. And here you are, and I'm as your friend, I'm just so pleased that you've succeeded, and I'll offer you a on-air welcome to the profession as a colleague.
Oh, thank you very much, Rory. Thank you.
Oh, I do like that. Yeah. and you're speaking about assignments, because I know that many people listening are going, well, the assignments, tell me about the assignments, because that is often when you go into counselling that the thing you perceive as being the biggest obstacle, whereas you have quite rightly identified there's so many other obstacles. The assignments are just a small thing and they're easily tackled. It's just about taking the theory, taking the knowledge, writing it to the criteria of the awarding body, and that's done and dusted. There's so much I guess other breadth to the journey itself. But I remember when I was studying, there was no Counselling Tutor podcast. We hadn't started it yet, Rory. I was a student at the time. There was no Counselling Tutor website with a search box in the front that if I put in a theory like 19 propositions would bring up a handout that I could download and have the theory right there. I would search website after website, getting conflicting information sometimes where I was finding, but that other website doesn't say that, and wondering which is the authority website. What can I cite here? Can I cite this? Or is this just somebody's opinions? Or is this actual researched content? And of course, now you've got the Counselling Tutor podcast with researched materials with our academic director, Mr. Rory Lees-Oakes. There he is, looking over that. And of course, our team of academic writers and our website, Counselling Tutor, of course, absolutely stacked full of resources, but we also have a paid-for resources that we call the counselling study resources, because it's resources linked to study. Really, it's a big library, and that library is absolutely packed with in-depth, researched, academically correct information on the topics you're going to cover in your learning journey. And I think that the real win for me in the counselling study resource are the lectures that Rory does. Rory's just got a way of putting things in easy to understand ways, and there are only over 90 hours of lectures, all on the theories that you will learn during your counselling training, explained in depth. I guess a lecturer within a college doesn't have the time to go so deep in. Rory's able to really deep dive. And I know that, Julie, that you did delve into those counselling study resources. How did you find them?
Oh, Ken, honestly, I cannot even tell you how I found them. There are no words to explain how essential they were in my counselling journey on a multitude of levels. First of all, listening to those lectures, like you said, it's a real, for me, it was like, oh, that's what that means. Very quickly, very easily understandable because of the way that it's explained. And I think that's the art of great teaching, where you can explain quite a difficult thing so simply to somebody else like me, so I can go, oh, I understand that now. So I used CSR from level 2, from right at the beginning, and it was just invaluable in terms of my time, because like you said, I didn't have to troll any websites. I didn't have to look anywhere else other than in that search engine. I typed it in and what I needed came up.
Wow.
For me.
Wow.
Well, Fab, we like the beans can. We like to say it does what it says on the tin, and
absolutely.
And indeed, we're just so pleased that that's happened. And of course, I would concur with that. Part of being a teacher, and you were a teacher yourself, to make the kind of difficult, transparent, easy to understand, and to remove that dreaded stress and save huge amounts of time. So I'm glad that happened. So Julie, now you're qualified, what does the future hold? What are you going to be doing? What are you up to?
Oh, well, and something that's happened to me as a result of my counselling training, I think, is that really I don't tend to have a plan for my life in X amount of years' time. One of my favourite songs by John Lennon is "Life." There's a quote in there that says, "Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans," which I totally agree with. But so I tend not to have a vision for my life in the future. What I tend to do now is focus on how I am right now and what feels right for me in this moment. And I'm lucky that I had a wonderful, wonderful placement when I was on my counselling course, and they would like me to stay on with them, which I am more than happy to do. And I do that 1 full day a week. And for now, I am happy where I am, gaining experience, gaining confidence, working with different people, different clients, which I absolutely love. In the future, I don't know what that holds, Rory, but I think along the horizon somewhere, private practice is kind of working its way into my feelings right now, and I know that is something I'm definitely interested in. It just doesn't feel right for me in this moment, but that would be my overall kind of leaning, if you will.
Well, I think it's fantastic, Julie, that you continue to give back by working in an organisation. You made a really valid point about making sure the placement that you have is one that you feel supported in and held in, and that you can do your best work in. And we wish you well with private practice. It's been lovely speaking with you, Julie. And if you want to speak with Julie, she's in the Facebook page. She pops in the Facebook page. Julie Wooly Woo is her nom de plume. We won't even go there. Wooly Woo, her nom de plume. And, if you want to hook up and just say hi and have a chat, if you're one of those students who's going through the pains of change or the fiery furnace of personal development, then pop into our Facebook group. And Julie Wooly Woo is always around. So Julie Naylor, a real pleasure, and just so lovely to hear about your journey. Congratulations from everyone at the CT team. We wish you the best in the world.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
So moving away, Rory, from a student journey and now heading towards a check-in, and that's a check-in with CPCAB. And I know that you recently spoke with Ray, and you were speaking about the use of assessment tools, Rory. Can you give us like a little bit of a colour of what we can expect from this segment?
Yeah, when we're talking about assessment tools, we're not talking about spanners and saws. What we're talking about is a checklist that's usually done right at the beginning of an engagement with their client to just get a sense of where they're at. And sometimes these are called Core 10, which has 10 questions, or Core 34, which has 34 questions. And there's lots of different assessment tools. What Ray helped us with today is just the importance of using the assessment tools in therapy. I know a lot of people think the tools are just there for tick boxing and for funders, but actually, as Ray outlines, correctly used, the assessment tools can be a real window to where the client is and how they're feeling. And not only that, can get us quickly into the material that they maybe want to talk about. It's really insightful.
Without any further ado, let's check in with CPCAB.
Check in with CPCAB.
Hello, I'm with Ray. How are you doing, Ray?
Yeah, I'm really good, Rory. Always nice to speak to you. How are you?
You know, I'm really, really good, and I think that I've just had a cup of tea, which gives me a good assessment of how I feel, and that is a kind of backdoor way into what this little segment's about. It's about assessment tools.
Yeah, really interesting assessment tools. As a tutor, it was one of the sessions that students particularly didn't sort of engage with as much as I would hope, and it's that I think that's partly why I wanted to bring it, because I wanted people to have just float this one past and say, actually, have a look at assessment tools. As practitioners, you're going to be using some form of assessment tool in your work, and maybe what's the reason for it, or why are they useful? And I've been fortunate enough to spend some time with John Mellor-Clark, who's one of the co-founders of Core IMS, or students may know as Core 10 or Core 34, two different types of assessment. There's other assessment tools like the GAD-7 and the PHQ-9 for depression, Beck's depression inventory. But I suppose because I've recently spoken with John Mellor-Clark, I'd probably like to talk about that, if that's okay, Rory.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with assessment tools because there's this idea about that they're not very person-centered, and my view is that they always did assessment back in the day, but they never really talked about it. So there's a great history of assessing clients. I know Rogers did it. He used a tape recorder in some cases. Yeah. So why are these tools so useful? And more to the point, Ray, how should we be using them?
Yeah, really, really interesting. When I was interviewing John, he kept on going on about this idea that an assessment tool it's not an administrative task; it's a clinical skill. And I think once you begin to understand why we use assessment tools or routine outcome measures, it sort of becomes clearer. And what he said was that actually the assessment tools do a couple of key things. They are very efficient at collecting a lot of information, and it helps the client to articulate their issues. And I think that for me as a practitioner is something that I find really exciting. Oh, by the by, this is one of the few assessment tools that was designed by practitioners for practitioners. Whoa, how does that sound? I mean, this is not a research tool that like some of the other assessment tools. This was designed by practitioners, and John just facilitated that. That I think sort of made me sit up and think, oh, okay, it's designed by practitioners. Let's give this a go. But this idea that it helps clients articulate what's going on. And I suppose when I think back to when I first starting to build a relationship and sort of coming back to what you were saying about, how do we use an assessment tool and still maintain therapeutic alliance or relationship, is that actually if you take seriously what is on that assessment and that it's actually meaningful for the client, then actually that might be the first time that person has articulated something that they haven't been able to do verbally.
Yes. And one of the things that we kind of get involved in is we look for clues. We don't analyze, but if a client's giving us a clue or a theme, we don't discount that. And there's no better clue than these assessment forms, because they're literally self-selected forms where people are literally telling us how they've been.
Yeah. I mean, this idea that assessment tools, they happen at the beginning of therapy, they happen at the end of therapy, they can happen in the middle. I like the term that John used. He said it's not an MRI scanner. It's not going to go drill down into the detail, but it's a thermometer. It's about just taking the temperature of what is going on in somebody's life. Whether you explore that or not can be done in a very person-centered way. But the thing about an assessment tool like this is that it hits key areas. It looks for well-being, it looks for anxiety, it looks for depression symptoms, it looks for evidence of trauma. It has risk built into it. So how is this person actually doing? And it looks at close relationships in 34 questions, or 10 if you do the shortened version. That is like gold dust for any practitioner.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you've hit on a really salient point here, Ray, that sometimes clients can't articulate it. Sometimes they can't find the words. The Core 10 or the Core 7 is a brilliant prompt, because as people are writing through, they can just put on what they want and then they hand it over. And then, like you say, the practitioner can look at that and make some thoughtful responses. So it's so important. We can't miss clients at any opportunity, can we?
No, and when somebody has taken the time to reflect on what's going on for them in their lives and been able to then put it on paper and articulate it, to actually take that as a piece of administration and just say, "Oh, thanks for that. I'll just hand it in at the desk at the front." That's not good enough.
No, it's not.
This is somebody that has just articulated that they're really struggling with something particular. That I think it's dismissive if that was done, but it's a general courtesy to say, actually, I've noticed that in this area you've scored a little bit higher than usual. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I think it's can be the ultimate discount to do the form, because I know I've supervised students who say, well, it's just for the funders, so I fill that in, and I actually say to the client, well, I've got to fill this in, it's for the funders, almost like it's a bit of an inconvenience, but actually the clue is in the word assessment tool. It's a clinical tool to observe where clients are.
I can't stress how important it is, and as well, it's a routine outcome measure. It is going to measure progress, and actually, if you're a client and you are beginning to improve, it's a form of feedback. The feedback works two ways. The client is giving you feedback on how the process is going. And one of the key areas for why assessment tools were brought in was to stop people from disengaging from therapy. Actually, if somebody can articulate the areas that are not going well for them, then you can adapt. We are there to give support to somebody else.
Absolutely. And because it's one that's self-filled in, sometimes they're filled in at every session, aren't they? I don't know what the recommendation for that is. I know that some fill them in at the beginning and fill them at the end, but some people said they should be filled in at every session, like to give that thermometer-like feel.
I think it does vary where you practice. So obviously, if you practice you have your own practice, then you can do it whenever you like. But you'll find that most organisations or agencies will have a particular. So some might do it right at the beginning, and then do an end of therapy in 6 weeks' time. Maybe it really does vary.
Yeah. But the clear message is that these assessment tools are you, and more importantly, your client's friend. They're an ally in the therapy room to really be able to in the service of the client.
Yeah, they're in the service of the client. And actually, I think I was just reflecting while you were talking about the first thing you said, and I was thinking, oh, did I answer that question? But this idea that we don't get taught how to deliver them. We really don't get taught how to deliver assessment tools. And I just really would like to encourage people to go online. Core is one of the assessment tools that is free. You can make as many copies as you like. It comes if you go onto the Core IMS website. There's a user manual. Spend some time with it. Begin to understand what it does, because when you issue that. As you said earlier, you don't want to say, "Oh, well, this is an admin task, and I'm really sorry that you have to fill this in, but we have to do it for our funders," because that really is not the point of an assessment tool.
No, and it's not good enough. It's been such an interesting walkthrough of what, for some people, I suspect, before listening to this podcast, would have thought was a bit of an administration, issue. Having to do this before they get to the meat and potatoes of the work. We'll put a link in the show notes on the mother page for you to access these free resources. And as always, Ray, it's just been fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rory. It's always a pleasure.
Check-in with CPCAB is proudly sponsored by CPCAB, the only awarding body run by counsellors for counsellors. To learn more about CPCAB qualifications and to get more detailed information on today's podcast topic, visit cpcab.co.uk.
Yeah, it's just a fascinating insight, isn't it? You know, I wonder how many people really understand that the Core 10 and the Core 34 were written for counsellors by counsellors, and properly used, they can just be so useful, save so much time, and also as Ray alluded to, you know, it sometimes means that the unsaid can be kind of worked with if someone's put it on the form. You know, someone saying, you know, I noticed that you're slightly more anxious today. It's pretty high. It's almost an invitation for the client to speak. It's a permission. So useful. And I produced a super duper handout called The Purpose of Assessment, and it gives a wide view of why we assess clients and why it's a consistent thing, why we do this on a regular basis to be ethical and to make sure we're giving the best possible service to our clients.
Yeah, and if you want to get Rory's super duper handout, it is free of charge, and you can get it by visiting our website, counsellingtutor.com. From the homepage, just click on the podcast tab. It'll show you all of our back catalogue of podcasts. This is episode 124, so make your way to 124. Right on that page are all the show notes, as we call them, which is kind of a précis of what we've discussed today. And you can download Rory's super duper handout from within that page on the purpose of assessment. And of course, there's a link through to our partners at CPCAB, because I know that Ray has also prepared some more resources for you, so you can follow that link and you can pick up those free resources as well. So moving away from assessment and going into practice, I guess, and talking about psychoeducation. So this is an interesting one, because I'm thinking back to my training. I did a person-centered course, and in this person-centered course, was kind of, the message was counselling is non-directive. You only work with what the client is bringing. You never tell the client what to do, what they should be doing. We're not there to diagnose. Yet my CPD, my continuing professional development post my training, has opened a much bigger world. And I've come to realize that way of thinking is right when you're a student, 100% right. And you need to work within that bubble and the protection of your college, your supervisor, and your placement. But when you get out there in the big wide world, a lot of research has been done since those early theoretical papers were written by Carl Rogers, Rory, and psychoeducation is now part of practice. Can you kind of just give us a background of what psychoeducation is so we can understand it?
Well, yeah, I mean, psychoeducation is a shortcut for psychological education. And you're absolutely right. You alluded to, you know, when you're taught your theory at college, you taught it's non-directive. You taught this. You just used the meta model, and there's a very good reason for that. Is because you've got to get competent in the model you're being trained at, and also students work within a placement, and usually placements allocate clients that are not on the very, very high risk level, if you like. A good placement manager will send students, clients who are kind of a fit for the level of training that a student is receiving. However, when you qualify, and certainly if you're like us, Ken, into private practice, what can happen is you get people who have very, very complex presentations, and part of that complexity is trauma. And one of the things I learned very, very quickly was if you had a client who's saying, I really didn't understand why I didn't fight back when I was attacked, or I can't understand why I let that person do that to me, and are carrying that guilt. Quite frankly, you can reflect and paraphrase all you want, but there's some solid science that tells us why people react in the way they do in stressful situations. And, you know, I've chewed over this long and hard, and I think if you've got information, if you've got something that can help someone, you should tell them. This isn't being directive. This isn't kind of diagnosing. This is just saying to the client, look, I hear you're really struggling with the reasons that you froze or you didn't fight back. And there's some scientific reasons for this. Can I share them with you? I'll share what I know. And just saying, look, the way the brain works is that in traumatic situations, it does one of three things. And I've shared that with clients, and the relief that clients had when they say, so it's not my fault, it was my body's way of protecting me in that situation. I say, yes. so freeing. As you rightly say, Ken, we've only known for about 20 years the effects of trauma. When Carl Rogers and Eric Berne and all the other theorists, Freud actually knew the effects of trauma. He recently had a posthumous paper published, which was actually absolutely really accurate. It's about bizarre as that. But yeah, you know, I think if Rogers was around, he would be interested in the idea that we can help clients understand their own process, their own phenomenology. And part of that is understanding how our bodies work in trauma. So psychoeducation is just sharing or normalizing what somebody does in a traumatic situation. That's the shorthand. It's a normalizing technique.
Absolutely. And we live in an age where science has developed tools to look inside and map the brain, to map the neurons, to map the different parts of the brain, to measure the the electrical activity when certain parts of the brain are used. For us to not work with that, to not learn from that and not share that with our clients when it is appropriate, is holding back and I guess not in service of that client, which is where we are. We are in service of the client. But it starts with your own continuing professional development. You have to learn about it from a trusted source yourself to be able to share this kind of information. And I know, we speak all the time about our pay for resources, Counselling Study Resource. Julie, our first guest, was speaking about how she used Counselling Study Resource as during her training for her assignments and to kind of underpin her work. But what you may not know is that Counselling Study Resource has a great number of lectures for qualified practitioners. You can still access them as a student to kind of broaden your knowledge and your horizons. But we have CPD lectures in there on the way the mind works, on trauma, on how people react in a sexual abuse situation, on self-harm, on brain plasticity, in these kind of presentations that we may see, so that we are first educated, so that we can educate our clients. And kind of my thought on this, because I did graduate with a purely person-centered, thou shalt not direct or say anything that the client didn't bring mindset. And it was only from learning that I was able to kind of grow beyond that. And now I look at it like this. If somebody came up to you and said, you know what, I'm a terrible, terrible person, and I'm going to tell you why. Every single day at about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, it's almost like I go completely unconscious. I don't know what happens. I don't know what's going on. And then all these funny, almost like pictures happen in my brain. I don't know what they are. They don't make any sense. And then 6 o'clock the next morning, everything comes back on. It's like I turn off every night and then I turn on again every single morning. I think I'm going insane. Would you go, wow, it sounds like every night you've got this switch that switches off and you don't come on again until the morning? Or would you say, you know, this is called sleep and this is normal and every single person has this because it is what the body needs to regenerate. And those pictures you're seeing in your mind is events that have happened in the day, things that you've heard, things that you've seen, things from your subconscious that are kind of arranging themselves and packing themselves into the places in your brain to store as long-term memories. And would you educate them about sleep? Of course you would. Of course you would, because not to do so, that would be unethical. And I think psychoeducation for me, Rory, is very similar to that, although be it very basic, the explanation I used there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And this isn't about practitioners being an expert. I'm not an expert on the brain or brain plasticity or neuroscience. The actual work or the support is about, given the situation you're in, this is what your brain does. And it can be so useful. And just to give an example of how much we know now, it was only in 1990 that a neuroscientist called Paul D. MacLean published his book called The Triune Brain. So we've only really understood how our brains work in trauma and what the different parts of the brains do in terms of our phenomenological experiencing since 1990.
Wow. It's new.
It's new. I mean, Rogers died in 87 and this was published 3 years after he died. So I think it's becoming I think maybe it's the kind of fifth force in psychology, the idea that we can disabuse our clients of so much by just saying, given what's happened to you, this is quite, I use inverted commas here. You can't see it, but I've got my inverted commas up. Normal. It's such a relief. It can be such a relief for clients.
Indeed it is. And it's about, again, just educating yourself. I remember one of the big light bulb moments for me was listening to a Rory that you did, Rory, which is listening to a lecture, not a Rory. A Rory that you did, Rory, a lecture that you did on Stockholm Syndrome. And that lecture is still in the Counselling Study resource today. It's under the practice section of lectures. Go into practice, click on lectures if you're a member of that, and go and look at that. And that's kind of where you can have an abuser in a relationship, and the person that is the abusee, that's being abused, can actually develop really strong bonds to that abuser. And they can present in practice saying, oh, I don't know why it is. I can't leave her. I just keep on being drawn back again and again and again. And again, if we're just going, oh, I hear that you just feel yourself going back again, and we're not psychologically educating ourselves first about what Stockholm Syndrome is, and therefore our clients, we can share so much. What an episode. This has been episode 124. It's been the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We started off welcoming Julie Naylor, or Julie Woolly Woo, when you see her in the Facebook group, and she shared her student journey with us today. Thank you very much for that, Julie. Then we had check-in with CPCAB, where Ray van der Poel spoke with you, Rory, about using assessment tools. Again, it's about educating ourselves, realizing what's out there, and of course we end episode 124 speaking about psycho-education in our practice. Whew, I'm worn out from today's episode, Rory. It's a lot of ground we've covered. We actually started before, when we were speaking to Julie, before starting training, going through level 2, 4 years of training we've been through. We've looked at the latest and greatest that's happening today in assessment tools. We've looked at neuroscience. We've looked at what happens within the brain and how we can educate our clients and ourselves. Wow.
Absolutely. I'm going to have to lie down in a dark room with a Garibaldi and a cup of Earl Grey. But, as always, hey, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.